Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, December 13th. Oh, yes, Friday the 13th. Can we... Yes. A rare overlap of sound effects right from the beginning here. Friday the 13th. Happy Friday the 13th to you, I guess. I am away from the microphone. Not a live show today because... Friday the 13th, death, I guess. No, I'm not dead. At least I wasn't when I recorded this. I can't speak to what's happening now. Okay, but this is quickly becoming not funny. And yet here we are. Okay, Friday the 13th. I'm away from the microphone today. Got some travel to take care of and some housekeeping business, etc., etc. But I didn't want to leave you without when there's so much that I could be sharing with you. Today makes a great day for sharing probably some long reads that just can't often find a place in a weekday show, but Friday seems like a great place for it. And also, of course, well, a couple of other tidbits. Not all, I guess, long reads, but here's one that I have been eyeing for a while that I thought might make a good backgrounder, just, somebody else's theory of what we're facing these days and what exactly is this next new weird chapter. Is it just straight up, can we just study fascism alone as a model and figure, oh yeah, that's the way? You know who's really good at following the rules, even if it's on the rules of fascism or the rules of having no rules? Donald Trump. I think he's going to make it kind of difficult to understand him to the extent that anybody has to. It might not do us any good to understand him. But I thought this was of interest. And a Substack type publication here again. The title of the I don't know what, the newsletter, I guess, is Liberal Currents. It's from Adam Gurry, Gurri. And I don't think we've read any of his stuff on the air before, although who knows? Maybe it's possible that Greg has mentioned him before. I don't know. Liberal Currents, again, the Substack vertical here at today's piece, or the piece that he wrote on December 5th that I'm finally getting around to reading to you, America's Paths to Personalism, which grabbed me as a maybe a new kind of label for something both authoritarian and fascist, certainly, but that have a little extra dash of cult of personality, perhaps, wrapped up in it. The three primary risk vectors of the second Trump administration is the subheader here on this piece, illustrated with a, I don't know what, sort of Chinese shrine to presumably a young-ish Mao Zedong, which decorated with hammers and sickles and everything, and doesn't say, and there's no caption to the photo saying exactly what it is, but you get the idea. Centering in the middle of this big red painted brick building facade, and centered in between two hammer and sickle combinations, is a gigantic round disc painted with, like I said, I guess a young Mao Zedong face with, a halo effect around him. Obviously, very much a dear leader sort of depiction. So you get the sense of what's going on here. Since 2015, this piece begins, Trump's opposition have feared that he had authoritarian aspirations. Every action he took after losing in 2020 certainly vindicated those fears. Another through line of Trump's career in and out of politics, however, is his intense focus on personal loyalty. Installing loyalists in key positions of power is, of course, a classic way to pave the way for establishing yourself as a dictator, but it is also an important move in establishing a personalist system. Some new terminology here for us, whether authoritarian or not. The risk of personalism is distinct but not unrelated to the risk of authoritarianism. as the political scientist Javier Marquez explains in his recent paper on the topic. We're going to be a little egg-headed here. Here's the excerpt. The personalization of power is the process through which the relative authority of the ruler and the political elite, and hence the relationships of horizontal accountability between them, shifts in favor of the ruler. This process is conceptually distinct from autocratization, I guess is how you would put it together. The loss of vertical accountability that results in ruling elites becoming less accountable to the populations over which they rule. It is quite possible that over the next 4 years, Trump will fail to surmount the status quo of term limits and competitive elections, yikes, but succeed, nonetheless, I would say, in converting the federal executive branch into a more complete system of personal rule by the president. The status quo of the imperial presidency already allows Trump to do quite a lot of substantively bad things without changing a single thing about the institutional arrangement. But any process of making things worse, whether to pursue mass deportation or to take the first steps towards authoritarianism, is almost guaranteed to pass through personalization first. If we can successfully mitigate the risks of personalization, we will likely mitigate a number of other things a personalist Trump presidency would do with his expanded power as well. Marquez has elsewhere described personalism as an inversion of the principal-agent relationship. You ready for another quote here? In institutionally constrained systems of rule, the ruler is the agent, and some other organization is the principal, which uses the ruler to achieve its own goals. Agents, i.e. rulers, may cheat and attempt to act in their own interests, but the organization can still hold them to account in a reasonably effective way. In personal systems of rule, by contrast, the ruler is the principal and the organization is the agent. The ruler uses the organization to achieve his goals rather than vice versa. I know it's a little abstract, but I guess you can imagine you can imagine examples from history wherein, and I guess in old style, pre-Enlightenment, I guess, style monarchies, you understood these things to be personal rule. And I guess over the course of history, say, certainly with the English monarchy and the English Parliament, you see a progression from the personal rule of the monarch constrained to some extent, by the nobles and by Parliament, to a shift where, in the case of the United Kingdom, where there's no governing role really whatsoever for the monarch. So that's an extreme case of change, but even before we arrived at the modern understanding, where the monarch still had some significant influence, and through the nobles still had significant influence, you could see the power dynamic change as the UK moved away from the personality of the rule. Anyway, back to the writing here. I can think of no better description of the relationship that Trump has established between himself and the Republican Party. American parties are extremely weak and porous. Their manifestations in the House, Senate, and White House rarely form a harmonious whole. Never mind the relationship between their offices in federal and state governments. Yet, somehow Trump has transformed the sprawling, decentralized, and frankly dysfunctional apparatus of nominating and promoting Republican candidates into a system of personal fealty. We saw signs of this early on when a wave of boring and ordinary Republicans retired from Congress, and the rest took the Lindsey Graham path. Drawing on Max Weber, Marquez discusses three broad strategies by which individuals establish personal rule: the mobilization of charisma, of legality or formal authority, and of informal authority. Again, a quote from the Marquez paper here. The mobilization of charisma draws on the emotional attachments between a leader and a group of followers to expand the reach of norms of allegiance to his person. The mobilization of formal authority exploits rational discourses of justification to expand the scope of formal executive powers. And the mobilization of informal authority takes advantage of the ruler's position in a network of interests to grow patronage networks that undermine other forms of authority. In what follows, I will discuss the risks of the second Trump term, chiefly through the lens of these paths to personalization. First up, the federal executive branch. It's deep. Most Americans have a sense that the president is in charge of everything in the federal executive branch, that he's the big boss of the whole apparatus. Now, you and I guess, know better. Most educated people do. But you can see where Trump gets this. I mean, in his imagination, that's just the case. And I guess from his observation, it's the case because he convinces himself that it's true no matter what is factually happening on the ground. His observation is that the presidents just do whatever they want, and he doesn't understand why that isn't the case for him. All right. Indeed, the notion that there are members of the federal executive bureaucracy who do not answer to the president is invoked frequently and with scorn. These, quote, unelected bureaucrats form a deep state that subverts the will of the democratically elected president. Let us set aside for the moment the question of just how democratic our process for picking presidents is. If what we want is a system of democracy and the rule of law, rather than one where we elect officials empowered to do whatever they please, then what we want is something like legislative supremacy. Legislative bodies are far more democratic than presidents because much finer subdivisions of the population have someone representing them in the legislative process. Of course, legislators do not implement their own legislation. It is up to the executive branch to execute the law. But in order for that execution to be democratic, it must actually be in accordance with those laws passed by at least a majority of the democratically elected legislators. In a parliamentary system, the ministers are voted in by the legislature to act as its agents in running the executive branch. In the American system, congressional committees oversee executive bodies in a number of ways. Budgets and appropriations must also pass through Congress, a lever that body does not fail to use in order to influence the character of the executive bureaucracy. As Josh Chaffetz explains, appropriations bills do what? Or are after what fashion? They are generally accompanied by detailed committee reports giving the specific amounts that the department or agency should spend on each program within the budget account. Given that the appropriations committees retain the power to specify detailed spending levels in the statutory language itself, and given that they retain power to drastically cut those spending levels in future years or attach unpleasant riders, the departments and agencies treat those committee reports as the equivalent of legislation. As Democratic representatives, and chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, David Obey, once put it in 2009, for any administration to say, well, we will accept the money but ignore the limitations, is to greatly increase the likelihood that they will not get the money. When agencies do wish to reprogram funds, in other words, to spend funds in ways that are consistent with the legislation but inconsistent with the committee report, they generally report to the relevant appropriations subcommittee and receive permission to do so. Such pressures seem generally effective. There is a growing body of evidence suggesting that the federal bureaucracy is broadly responsive to congressional preferences. As Morris Fiorina provocatively put it, Congress controls the bureaucracy, and Congress gives us the kind of bureaucracy it wants. strange as it may seem, the best arrangement for having a system that is both democratic and lawful is to vest a representative assembly with the highest institutional authority, but to give executive bodies arm's length independence from elected officials. As Chaffetz documents, there is plenty of evidence that such independence does not, in practice, mean that the authority of the representative assembly is ignored. What it does mean is that civil servants can be made to understand that their duty is to implement and follow the law rather than to merely follow orders. Follow the law rather than merely follow orders. Got it. The problem with the president is that by its nature, it is an office that governs by giving orders. Unlike a prime minister, the president cannot be removed by a simple majority vote from a single chamber of the legislature. Indeed, impeachment has proven too high a bar even when a president has sent a mob which physically threatens members of Congress in their place of business. Moreover, the levers that Congress has to discipline the executive branch must, by and large, be approved by the president as well, for ultimately budgets and appropriations pass through ordinary legislation. Budgets really don't, actually, but okay. And finally, the president can claim democratic legitimacy that competes with the legitimacy of Congress rather than complementing it. Separately elected presidents, by their nature, thereby put democratic legitimacy in tension with the rule of law. Oh no. Still, America has coped remarkably well with this tension compared to other presidential systems. Our Congress has remained quite strong compared to any system, and our federal courts have grown stronger and stronger over time, while our tendency to skew in the direction of judicial supremacy is hardly desirable. One thing it does not foster is personalism. Like many of his predecessors, including in his own first term, Donald Trump will seek to cast off the constraints on the powers of the personalist president. Unlike those predecessors, he comes to office with a team of people who have spent time laying the groundwork to succeed at this specific endeavor. He also begins his term with a sycophantic Supreme Court supermajority that was willing to invent a new category of legal immunity just for him while he was out of office. Our system is vast and complex, with many levers available for many actors to resist the powers of the president. Trump may not succeed, but Marquez's analysis provides a guide to how he is likely to make the attempt. All right, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of it. Prestige and power is the next section. Marquez describes the first avenue of attack as follows. By the mobilization of charisma, I mean the process by which charismatic attachments with a relatively limited number of followers are mobilized to expand the degree to which the authority of the leader is enforced on groups which may not have charismatic attachments to him. Charismatic authority in modern states typically finds itself hedged by legal norms, and charismatic attachments are difficult to sustain except in conditions of crisis. But leaders can exploit charismatic attachments with limited numbers of followers to weaken or even destroy formal norms that hedge their power, or to introduce new norms that expand their discretion, even if charismatic attachments weaken. I know, it's kind of highfalutin language, but see if you can follow through to this clarification, or the next section of narrative here. One of his examples is the Cultural Revolution, in which Mao leveraged his personal prestige to encourage various groups to attack his rivals within the CCP, Chinese Communist Party. So intense was the response that at the peak, the formal head of the Chinese government was subjected to a struggle session. How do you like the name of that one? And beaten by his own staff. That is rather remarkable. Trump's relationship with his base is as rooted in charisma or personal appeal as Mao's was with his own. The reason that Trump has been so successful in converting the Republican Party into the party of Trump, despite the decentralized and wide open nature of American parties, is precisely because he has a mass of extremely loyal supporters to leverage. Though large in absolute terms, it is not a large segment of society overall. Trump won the 2024 primary with 17 million votes. At 76%, that is an overwhelming supermajority of primary voters. However, it is only around 5% of the roughly 156 million people who voted in the general election, and 5% of the overall population. 5% of the population is more than enough to achieve cultural revolution levels of terror if they are willing to go that far. Rather than struggle sessions, of course, we are more likely to see events such as January 6th repeated. During the election cycle, we saw how the focus on a single town, I can imagine they mean here Springfield, Ohio, was enough to induce an atmosphere of terror there. In both cases, it is not as though Trump issues explicit orders about what his followers ought to do. He's a mafia boss in that sense, movie mafia boss, I guess. But all of them were mobilized by his personal charisma to take aggressive action. In the first Trump term, old guard Republicans with a reputation for working with Democrats either retired or completely reinvented themselves into frothing Trump loyalists, as Lindsey Graham most famously did. They did not do this out of the expectation that Trump would reward them for the shift, but out of fear that Trump's base would be turned against them in their own primaries. Given both Trump's broader base and the nature of the current Republican staffer class, there's a link there to what this explains, but it's one of his own previous articles, apparently under the title of DeSantis's Nazi Problem and the Republican Staffer Class. Staffer Class, that's a new one on me. But given both Trump's broader base and the nature of the current Republican staffer class, physical threats to keep people in line are not out of the question. This is why the GOP has failed to rid itself of Trump for the past 9 years, even when he was a clear electoral loser. And when Trumpist candidates underperformed in 2022, they could not rid themselves of him or his loyalists. Trump is not at the forefront of a broader movement, though intellectual conservatives, so-called intellectual, quote-unquote, intellectual conservatives, have worked overtime since the beginning to try and build one around him. Instead, Trump's leadership rests on a foundation of charismatic attachment, something that by its nature is tied to him personally. And I guess this is perhaps some version of what I'm thinking of every time I don't know, when I say things like, hey, every day is another opportunity for Trump to eat the wrong hamburger and drop dead. And people say, yeah, but J.D. Vance. And I say, yeah, but let's see J.D. Vance try to drive the bus of Donald Trump's cult of personality. The guy who couldn't even muster the charisma to order a donut. I don't think so. Could someone else wield it on his behalf? I am not sure. Anyway, back to the writing here. It's a fickle thing that is difficult to measure. By one estimate, roughly 1/3 of self-identified Republicans define their politics based on their enthusiastic embrace of Trump and his rhetoric specifically. Trump's personal social network, Truth Social, has about 1 million active monthly users and 5 times as many website visitors. That is vanishingly small for a social network, but impressively large for assembling a people for whom the only benefit is being in digital proximity to Trump and fellow Trumpists. It is difficult to say how large the potential pool of mobilized people truly is, especially since Trump overall has never been particularly popular by traditional measures, although disturbingly, he is doing much better lately. Still, the proof is in the pudding. Trump loyalists have frequently shown up, whether it's on the streets, in the Capitol, on Truth Social, or in purchasing his merchandise. Whatever its current size, the maintenance and cultivation of charismatic attachments requires frequent, quote, campaigns. The perception during the first Trump term that he was producing gobs of news events a week stems from this imperative to maintain his primary source of strength. Where Hitler expanded his charismatic authority through quick, decisive military victories, Trump maintains his primarily through his, quote, owning the libs first approach to public communications, constantly feeding his base fresh culture war red meat. It remains to be seen the extent to which Trump can succeed in mobilizing charisma to engage in authority destruction against those arms of the state that limit his power in office. Next section, a spoils system. Marquez describes the most common facet of authoritarian regimes, and especially of personalist ones, as follows. Patronage involves the informal authority that emerges in unequal but enduring relations of exchange between a patron and many clients, where the former typically provides economic resources in exchange for political support. Patrimonial regimes are characterized by high levels of deinstitutionalization, where formal authority is no longer a good guide to the location of power. And now back to the narrative. While it is true that one needn't be the formal head of state to be the true head of a patrimonial regime, think about the crown prince in Saudi Arabia, I suppose, the informal authority rulers acquire through patronage is typically parasitic on their formal authority. So it is often one and the same person in both positions. Indeed, the top patron usually leverages their patronage to get the top spot in government. Elon isn't, or at least hasn't so far, but we'll see whether that changes, which they then use to further grow their patronage network. Marquez uses the example of Putin, who developed an extensive patronage network during his first tenure as president and remained the true center of the patrimonial regime when he hit his term limit and became prime minister in 2008. Everyone understood this at the time. However, there was a genuine risk for Putin that his successor, Medvedev, may have been able to use the presidency to build a patronage network of his own, and truly supplant Putin's personal authority. It worked out for Putin because the groundwork he had laid before stepping down allowed him to get officials to provide a, quote, legal path to return to the presidency. Trump's mode of governance has always been in the mode of a patronage network. He did this even under extremely high stakes, the extremely high stakes of the early pandemic. The Project 2025 plan for the federal executive branch is more or less a return to the principle of the spoils system, a form of patronage that was openly touted in Jackson's day. Now, he also has Elon Musk as part of his coterie, someone who has already demonstrated his willingness to throw around serious cash for the cause. The more cash and jobs he has to offer to join his patronage network, the larger and more powerful it will become. The more the jobs in question are in the federal government specifically, or the court system, the more Trump's personal power will expand. Even tariffs, the most seemingly economics-focused policy of Trump's touted agenda, will undoubtedly be used to reward allies and punish enemies to strengthen Trump's hold on his patronage network. Next up, formalism and elite persuasion. The final line of attack Marquez describes is as follows. Rulers can expand their formal authority by mobilizing coalitions to change constitutions or other public norms regulating their discretion. While the mobilization of charisma and or informal authority are typically necessary to the construction of such coalitions, the expansion of formal authority will normally also involve the deployment of persuasive arguments. For example, rulers who face term limits often craft very specific arguments to evade or change them, and such arguments shape how parliamentary coalitions, Supreme Courts, or the public at large evaluate and react to those proposals. Significant resources are invested in persuading others of the rationality of formal institutional change, rather than simply mobilizing them through emotional appeals or co-opting them with economic resources. January 6th is the most famous of the Stop the Steal efforts that the Trump campaign pursued after it lost the 2020 election. But it was by no means where most of its efforts were invested. They filed a large number of lawsuits. They prepared fake electors. Oh my God, they actually did that. They prepared fake electors and they pressured election officials. The fake elector scheme was supposed to line up with their strategy to have Vice President Pence reject the certification of the election results, after which they would move to have these new electors' votes take the place of the original ones. What all of these have in common is the use and misuse of formal justifications and existing institutional procedures. Rather than sending a mob to intimidate or do violence, they file a lawsuit. Rather than struggle sessions, they have creative readings, quote unquote creative readings of existing law that they attempt to get other members of the elite, such as Mike Pence, to throw their support behind. Sometimes the use of institutional procedure and legal interpretation is quite above board. After all, anyone can file a lawsuit and get their day in court. Other times, as in the whole certification and fake elector scheme, what they're doing is plainly at odds with both law and practice. But if the precedent can be set and enough people with institutional authority line up behind it, it will become law and practice. As Marquez puts it, many moves of dubious legality can increase executive power as long as they cannot be effectively challenged. I think that has a lot to do with Trump's perception of the power of the presidency. Very often, the power that the president will wield is not formally his to wield, but he does find other ways of convincing people to fall in line and willingly adopt these new practices. And it's not the case that the president forced them to do it and dictated the results, but rather that he either convinced people or leveraged existing powers such that minds were changed. But there was a whole process to it, and other people had to agree willingly, even if under duress, they had to agree willingly to jump out of the way. It's not that the president forced them out of the way, but to an observer like Trump, he sees the president make a demand and a thing happen and skips all the rest. All right, so there we were. As Marquez had put it, many moves of dubious legality can increase executive power as long as they cannot be effectively challenged. The certification scheme failed because Pence was never on board. The Supreme Court likely would not have been either, and enough members of Congress also were not. Even then, 8 senators and, more significantly, 139 members of the House objected to the certification. Trump's control over the GOP has only been consolidated further in the interim. There will likely be all manner of moves of dubious legality that he calls upon them to support over the next 4 years, all in the name of expanding his personal power. Throughout his first term, Trump made extensive use of this tactic. He used emergency powers expansively. He bribed farmers to compensate for the pain that they faced from his tariffs without this new line of subsidy even going through Congress, and pushed the boundaries in a number of ways. And the people around Trump have learned practical lessons from their first experience of power and have not spent the last 4 years idle. Project 2025 is essentially a multi-million-dollar effort to devise a plan of action of just this kind. All the detailed procedures and creative interpretations of law that Trump might need in order to convert the federal executive branch into a tool of personal rule. They wrote it, they published it, it's freely available to the public. Trump distanced himself from it during his campaign because it was polling poorly, certainly, but also perhaps because there is a sense in which the whole project is aimed at making him into the agent of a specific agenda rather than the principal. Nevertheless, he is bringing on board plenty of people involved in it. There is no reason to doubt that he and his people are going to try to implement it, and that an important consequence will be the personalization of the federal government. Very interesting. The idea that he distanced himself from it, not just because it was polling poorly, but because it made it look like the Project 2025 people were the ones calling the shots, and he doesn't like that very much. I'm calling the shots. And that was always the communication from the campaign. Just because Project 2025 says this is a goal of the next Trump administration doesn't mean it is. It will become the goal of the next Trump administration when Trump says it is. But they did issue that kind of comment very frequently. Now, before he has even returned to office, he is attempting to, quote, introduce new norms, unquote, such as that the Senate must recess in order to allow him to appoint whomever he pleases. Formally, we discussed in these terms, didn't we? Formally, a president cannot make this happen. Despite Trump's claim to the contrary, he claims prorogation powers that so far no one else has ever actually agreed existed. But the risks that come with opposing Trump and facing his base in a primary or in the flesh are no small matter. John Thune, the new Senate Majority Leader, has made noises that the Republican caucus might go along with this move. Right? So in Trump's mind, that's obviously the power exists. Whereas in more subtle minds, it's, well, the power probably doesn't exist, but the threat of something other than the use of formal authority is enough to make people say, well, I'll tell you what, I'll do the thing you're demanding anyway. And to the casual observer, it will look like you demanded it. And so therefore it happened. So that must mean you have that power, as opposed to you demanded it and we were afraid of what you might do to us extra legally if we didn't agree. So we agreed. And what really made this happen was our agreement, not your order. But in the retelling of it on OANN or wherever people are getting their news, and certainly straight from Trump's mouth, it will be, I ordered it and that's why it happened. There are reasons for optimism on this front. When Matt Gaetz withdrew his nomination for Attorney General, it was apparently Trump himself who told him to do so because he didn't, quote, have the votes. This means that contrary to Thune's cooperative rhetoric, he had made it clear to Trump that there would be a vote, right? And Trump's demand was, let there not be one. But Thune obviously said, there's going to be one, and that's the only thing that could possibly make Trump think so-and-so not having the votes, Gaetz in this case, even made a difference, right? So Thune had made it clear to Trump there would be a vote, and too few would be willing to support Trump's choice. Thune's selection for majority leader itself was at odds with Trump's own wishes. None of this means that Trump will fail to crush all internal opposition later. Mao, for example, was frustrated by his rivals on many occasions and indeed was typically eclipsed by others in their formal authority, but ultimately created a situation in which none of them dared criticize him. And now Trump has pre-announced that he will be firing the current FBI director, something for which presidents typically suffer a political cost. Yet there seems to be little in the way of a reaction. So long as institutions remain more or less intact, any president is likely to engage in this kind of formalism and proceduralism to some extent. We will certainly need to pay close attention to how the Trump administration does so in pursuit of personalism, but in many ways, the greatest danger comes when even superficial attempts at appearing lawful have been discarded for, quote, a ruler who can rely on his informal or charismatic authority over others needs to expend less justificatory, is it? All right. Effort to expand his formal authority. I guess that too from Marquez. In combination is the beginning of the next section. The important point is that these elements are not isolated, but offer individual tactics in an overall strategy of the personalization of power. Another quote from Marquez, charismatic mobilization makes use of the strong affective attachments of particular groups to a leader to enforce extra-legal norms of allegiance to him. The mobilization of formal authority deploys justificatory, oh my goodness, I had to do this twice. Justificatory? Is that really right? Discourses to enhance the legal rational affordances of a ruler's official position. This is exactly how Democrats should not be talking, by the way. And the mobilization of informal authority colonizes formal structures to bend them to a ruler's will. Each of these forms of authority also interacts with the others to shape the possibilities for personalization in a given regime. Thus, legal authority can be used to strengthen patronage networks. Control over patronage can be used to increase a ruler's formal authority. And control over formal authority can be used to promote the ruler's charismatic authority. What makes Trump uniquely dangerous as a figure is that he truly does bring all three together the way no president in recent memory could have. None brazenly made use of patronage the way he does, something for which he has faced no consequences whatsoever, proving that he can continue to do so safely. Only Obama could be said to have had any groups to be mobilized through charisma, and he simply used it for the prosaic purposes of winning elections, nothing more. Most men in the history of the, quote, imperial presidency made use of formalism to attempt to expand their personal power, but few had a pool of talent quite so dedicated to gaming it out as Trump has, and none of them had the ability to buttress this strategy with the other two. It is not always true that forewarned is forearmed. There is only so much any of us can do to resist the process of personalization that Trump is about to embark on, but it is my hope that if we can identify each of these strategies as he deploys them, we stand a better chance to find levers to use against them. And that is linked to yet another of his articles. I wonder whether that might make an interesting follow-up, but it is rather lengthy. But if we don't read it at this point, a practical program for resisting a Trump second term, how to fight back against the implementation of fascism in America. Well, we might be interested in reading such a thing, or at least skimming it at some point. Anyway, I know, like I said, not the way Democrats should be talking, a little too formal, a little too dry. Might make some sense to think a little bit more about the Marquez excerpts and try to attach examples to them. But to do that on the fly with such dry and layered language seemed a little too much to do as we were in progress. So perhaps you'll forgive me. Hopefully it made sense to you as we walked through it as slowly and deliberately as I could. Now here, I think, is a good example, a good practical and concrete example of what sorts of things Donald Trump might be able to accomplish for himself and his, we'll call them co-conspirators, let's say, through the exercise of this sort of personality, or, even without it, even if he's not able to perfect it, the sort of thing that placing him atop the federal government and the executive bureaucracy makes possible. It doesn't take very much to imagine such a scene, but here's one that's playing out right in front of us. Donald Trump controls a publicly traded company. Don't forget that. And now he will pick its regulator. You probably already can guess what we're talking about. Subheader here in this ProPublica piece by Justin Elliott, Robert Federecci, I hope I've got that close to correct, and Alex Mirjeski, whose name we've attempted before. Donald Trump controls a publicly traded company. You know which one. Now he will pick its regulator. There have been internal concerns that Trump media could be misleading investors, a source said. But with its largest shareholder about to be president, experts doubt the SEC is up to the job of investigating Truth Social's parent company. and I'm sure that's just the way he wants it. Last month, a major shareholder of a publicly traded company took to social media to complain that people, perhaps short sellers, were spreading lies that could hurt his firm's stock price. There are fake, untrue, and probably illegal rumors, the Post read. I hereby request, always hereby when he's getting formal, I hereby request that the people who have set off these fake rumors or statements, and who may have done so in the past, be immediately investigated by the appropriate authorities. The Securities and Exchange Commission doesn't typically take its marching orders from shareholders of the companies on social media. But in this case, the poster was Donald Trump, who is just weeks away from being inaugurated and gaining the power to appoint the head of the SEC. Right? And when we were just reading about the levers of power in the legislative branch, the idea that controlling somebody's budget and budgetary authority was enough to get the heads of executive branches to bend to the will of the legislative authority. Here, the ability to make someone, yes or no, the head of the SEC probably will come with a lot of authority in its own right. When Trump takes office in January, a president will, for the first time, because everybody else had to sell their peanut farms, will for the first time be the majority owner of a publicly traded company, Trump Media, which runs Truth Social. Former SEC officials are concerned about how Trump could try to use the agency to go after the foes of his company, which accounts for more than half his fortune at this point, I would add. The words "at this point" are not in the article. They also worry that the agency isn't up for the job of taking on Trump Media should it run afoul of securities laws. And believe me, it will run afoul of securities laws. Cases involving public companies with aggressive lawyers are difficult, even if you don't have conflicts of interest and concerns about pissing someone important off, a current employee in the SEC's enforcement division said. I don't think anyone would explicitly say don't do it, but they'd just be like, I could do another case. In Trump Media's short history, it has had a combative relationship with the SEC, though it has never been charged with wrongdoing by the agency. And of course, that's the sort of thing that Trump and his supporters will point to. See, we've done nothing wrong. Well, it may just be that you've never been charged with wrongdoing by the agency because it's either too much of a pain in the ass when you were out of power or literally dangerous to your physical person when he is in power. Does that mean the same thing as, well, I've never been charged and so therefore I must be innocent? No, it does not. In 2022, as Trump Media was seeking to go public, which it did, through a merger with an already traded company, it threatened to sue the SEC because of what it called inexcusable obstruction and obvious conflicts of interest among SEC officials and clear indications of political bias. The CEO of the company, believe it or not, remember, it's Devin Nunes, posted on the platform itself, "No more BS." The company never sued, by the way. The following year, the company that took Trump Media public settled fraud charges with the SEC for $18 million after the agency found it made misrepresentations in its filings. The SEC also brought insider trading charges against several people who invested in the deal. Other previously unreported issues have raised alarms inside the company that Trump Media could be violating securities laws by misleading investors. According to a person with knowledge of the company has long reported in its disclosure filings that it does not track basic performance numbers for Truth Social. In its securities filings, the company says it, quote, does not currently and may never collect, monitor, or report certain key operating metrics used by companies in similar industries, such as the number of active users and ad views. It has always been a puzzling claim, akin to a TV network choosing not to track ratings. Other publicly traded social media companies do track and report such fundamental measures of success for their platforms. But according to interviews and records reviewed by ProPublica, The company does not track the numbers, and the active user count is a tiny fraction of its competitors. ProPublica reviewed images of an internal Truth Social employee dashboard from 2022 showing the company monitored the number of active users. Internal communications from this year show the practice continued. The SEC investigates those kinds of discrepancies, experts said. Securities laws prohibit companies from knowingly misleading investors about information deemed to be significant to the company's share price. In a statement, Trump Media accused ProPublica of, quote, willfully misrepresenting TMTG's public filings and the content of stolen information, and relying on, quote, unreliable individuals with known axes to grind, unquote. The statement also alleged ProPublica was, quote, conspiring with others to engage in marketplace manipulations and fraud, and we will bring evidence of this malfeasance to the relevant local, state, and federal officials, unquote. The company did not respond to a request to explain what was misrepresented. But just to pause for a moment here, you see what is going on. Securities law prohibits companies from knowingly misleading investors about information deemed significant to the company's share price. So, for instance, we have no information about metrics that we typically use in other social media companies to evaluate the share price. How much is this company worth? Well, it matters how many people are reading it and how much traffic there is and how much time they spend on there and how many eyeballs you can sell ads to, yada, yada, yada. But for some reason, Truth Social doesn't have any of those numbers. What we do have is user numbers, and we track them internally. But supposing we tell you we have 10 billion users. No, you don't. You have less than 1 million. Well, we're reporting 1 billion or 10 billion, and there aren't 10 billion people in the world. Yes, but we're reporting it nonetheless. What are you going to do about it? Well, I'll report you to the SEC. Oh, we are the SEC. That will be very interesting. And then, of course, even more aggressive, if you point this out and that the Trump SEC will likely jump out of the way of these sorts of claims, well, in that case, you're just attacking Truth Social and trying to undermine our share price, and we're going to sue you for tortious interference with our business. But you can't. That's not a real thing that you can claim against somebody. Oh, well, we'll ask some judges that I appointed whether or not that's something I can claim against you. Oh, that is a little scary. While current and former SEC officials doubt the SEC will aggressively regulate Trump Media, the company is at least relatively small. The agency's oversight of companies owned by Trump associates will also be fraught and could have broader market implications. Elon Musk's Tesla, for example, is more than 100 times the size of Trump Media. Musk has for years fought bitterly with the SEC. He settled a securities fraud case with the agency and later declared that, quote, something is broken with SEC oversight, because he lost. After Musk became one of Trump's most important financial backers, Trump appointed him to lead a commission to target government spending that it deems wasteful. Securities experts warned that if the SEC fails to aggressively regulate companies connected to the president or his allies, it could have disastrous consequences. Of course, if they do aggressively regulate such companies, Elon Musk could decide that the SEC is government waste and deem it fodder for the chopping block, I guess. If political power buys the power to defraud, that's a problem, not just for our politics, but for our markets. Markets. American companies have an easier time getting capital because there's faith in the way the American capital markets are regulated, said Howard Fisher, a SEC trial lawyer during Trump's first term. And one of the people who are, I guess, career employees at the SEC, the sort of people who will now be purged from that agency and every other one under Schedule F and Project 2025 plans. But he's right. It's a good point. American companies have an easier time getting capital because everybody believes in the way American capital markets are regulated. This thing won't be just a total fraud, and I won't lose everything without any opportunity to recover, because at the very least, if we can prove that they were engaged in fraud, we can force them to pay us back. What if that disappears? How much money will be invested in anything under the legitimate basis or the regime that we knew and understood? Now, that may be replaced with totally corrupt investment. Who would invest in something that runs the risk of being a fraud if there was no way to enforce fraud law against those companies that are asking for investment? Well, Elon Musk might, because even though, well, for one thing, he doesn't actually have to wait for there to be actual fraud to sue them if the judges are completely under the sway of Donald Trump and therefore Elon Musk. But also, he'll have very little doubt of being able to recover because he's on the right side. Anybody else, though, raising capital from anybody who doesn't pull Donald Trump's levers might be problematic. And, you know, that could have issues. But then, of course, that would only mean that people who aren't on Donald Trump's side find that it's difficult to impossible to make any money or invest any money with any confidence. And only people who suck up to Donald Trump and remain on his side have the capital markets open to them. That, too, could be disastrous. Even if it doesn't collapse the economy in general, it will be a massive shift of wealth, not only up the chain as usual, but up a specific portion of the chain, only to, let's say powerful oligarchs who support the rule of Donald Trump. That could be bad. Back to the article here from ProPublica. Created after the stock market crash of 1929, the SEC is part of the executive branch, but operates independently of the White House, or has up to this point anyway. Presidents appoint the agency's chair, who leads a 5-member commission that includes members of both parties. The agency's nearly 5,000 employees report to that commission as they do the work of regulating the securities industry. How much impact is the president supposed to have on the SEC's day-to-day operations? The answer is none, said Allison Herron-Lee, a former Democratic SEC commissioner appointed during the first Trump administration. The line between the SEC and the president on enforcement actions has been crossed before. President Richard Nixon, I can't believe it, his aides pressured the SEC's general counsel, G. Bradford Cook, to remove a reference to the financier's illegal contribution to the Nixon campaign from an SEC complaint against the executive. Nixon then installed Cook as the SEC's chair, but after the meetings with Nixon's aides were revealed, Cook resigned as chair, saying the effectiveness of the agency might be impaired because of the perception of undue influence. If Trump tries to make enforcement demands of the SEC, as he did in his Truth Social post calling for an investigation of short sellers, SEC officials would face a choice. Either ignore the president and risk his wrath, or follow his orders and undermine their independence. Former SEC officials interviewed by ProPublica predicted a middle path in which the agency would not seriously investigate baseless claims against the company's foes, but would claim it was doing so to satisfy him. That would, of course, saddle his foes with a dark cloud and all the baggage that goes with it, making it therefore difficult for them to access capital and operate as usual so long as they were outside of his good graces. That's an important addition there, and we're meant, I think, at this point to infer that. The co-director of the SEC's enforcement division during Trump's first term told ProPublica he knew of no instances of Trump getting involved in enforcement decisions during his first term. We didn't have issues of political interference, said Stephen Paikin, who is now in private practice. We investigated some significant political figures. The Trump-era SEC investigated former Representative Chris Collins, a Republican Trump ally from New York, who pleaded guilty to insider trading. Trump later pardoned him, so I guess it doesn't really matter. The agency also investigated former Republican North Carolina Senator Richard Burr for insider trading after the coronavirus stock market crash. Burr said the case was ultimately dropped. Why do we have to rely on his say-so? I don't know. That's odd. Still, during his first term, Trump did not shy away from asking the SEC to consider specific regulatory changes. In 2018, for example, he tweeted that after speaking with some of the world's top business leaders, he had asked the agency to consider allowing companies to stop filing quarterly reports and move to twice-a-year reporting. Well, this was highly unusual. Lee, the former SEC commissioner, told ProPublica. Trump's SEC chair at the time, Jay Clayton, said the agency was looking into the frequency of reporting before rejecting the idea months later. So it could be the kind of bureaucratic foot-dragging that confounded him so often in his first term. We'll see whether that happens in the second. Though Clayton was generally popular among the SEC's staff, his chumminess with Trump, including multiple rounds of golf together, did raise concerns about his independence. In 2020, Clayton was asked during a House hearing if he ever discussed SEC matters with Trump during their golf outings. There are no conversations that I've had that make me in any way, uncomfortable with my independence, he testified. That's a yes, of course. But it's a yes, but. Yes, we discussed SEC matters, but I feel like I was totally in control of things anyway. While the SEC investigates possible civil violations of securities law, it is up to the FBI, oh no, and the Department of Justice, oh no, to pursue criminal cases. Trump's selections to lead both of those agencies in his second term have ties to his social media company, interestingly enough, but would be troublesome enough even if they didn't. Kash Patel, the FBI pick, is on the Trump media board. Pam Bondi, selected to be Attorney General, was identified in an April filing as owning a stake in the company worth more than $4 million at current prices. It is not clear if she still owns the shares, and Bondi did not respond to a request seeking comment. If federal authorities shy away from scrutinizing Trump media, securities experts said the void could be filled by state authorities, who Trump has no authority over, except possibly asking for somebody to go murder them and then pardoning them when they did. Although they would be subject to state charges, they might make sure that they murder those people inside of a red state and get the governor to take care of that. Or Trump may say, oh, there's no difference between federal and state charges in my view. And if I can get 5 of these idiots over here in the robes to agree, then I'm right. Anyway, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw blue state securities regulators opening investigations, said Andrew Jennings, a law professor who teaches securities regulation at Emory University. New York's Attorney General has already entered the fray. Letitia James's office is examining an emergency loan provided to Trump media before it went public from a trust connected to a bank in the Caribbean, according to records and a source with knowledge of the probe. Why didn't you use a good old USA American bank? Last month, the Financial Times reported that Trump media is in talks to buy a crypto trading venue called Backed. Remember that one? We were trying to figure out, how to say it, but that was the one that Kelly Loeffler owned. If that deal is consummated, it would be Trump's second crypto venture following the September launch of a Trump-affiliated token by a company called World Liberty Financial. They're very much in the news lately as well. Trump's crypto investments create yet another area of potential conflict of interest within the SEC, whose current Democratic chair, Gary Gensler, led an enforcement campaign against the crypto market, which he described as rife with fraud and scams, which is the way that Trump used to describe the crypto market before he had two entries in the field, the token, and now, hopefully for him, buying an exchange as well. On Wednesday, Trump announced his nominee to chair the SEC, Paul Atkins, a Bush-era SEC commissioner who has spent the last 7 years as co-chair of a crypto advocacy group. Deregulating crypto was a theme of Trump's campaign, with Trump telling a crypto conference over the summer, the rules will be written by people who love your industry, not hate your industry. So I guess look out for some corruption on that front. So there is something else in the news, and I guess all right. Since I'm recording this ahead of time, everything is out of order chronologically. Shall we just throw this in here? Then I don't have to do this in between. And, I was thinking of using it. But okay, how about this news from the New York Times? This just follows, I think, very closely on this. Eric Trump promises the, quote, most pro-crypto president, unquote, in history. Now, there's really only been probably two presidents who even had, like three, maybe, who have had the opportunity to be anything on crypto. Was, I guess, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump. But okay, at any rate, somebody's got to be the most pro-crypto of the three of them. Speaking at a Middle East conference, and this is problematic, President-elect Donald J. Trump's son said his family had embraced cryptocurrency because some banks stopped doing business with them after January 6th. That is a convenient and interesting excuse. This, again, in the New York Times, byline reads, Ismail Naar, Eric Lipton, and David Yaffe Bellany. Okay. Hopefully I'm even remotely close on most of those names. Eric Trump, maybe. Okay, no one has ever told me for sure. Eric Trump flew across the world to headline a cryptocurrency conference in the United Arab Emirates this week and told thousands of enthusiastic attendees that he and his father, the U.S. president-elect, were effectively working in tandem to push crypto, a business sector the family is directly invested in. The message was notable because it contrasted drastically with the promise the family made when Donald J. Trump entered the White House 4 years ago to keep his business and government operations separate. This, of course, I think they mean 8 years ago, to keep his government and business separate. Eric Trump said that he even phoned his father, Pops, he said he calls him, to celebrate when the price of Bitcoin hit $100,000 after the president-elect announced that he intended to appoint a crypto-friendly lawyer as the new chairman of the SEC, which regulates the industry that the family now profits from. You're going to have the most pro-crypto president in the history of America, Trump told the crowd. Eric Trump did. Think about a president who isn't going to allow Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies to be overregulated and stifled. Eric Trump made the remarks at the Bitcoin MENA 2024 conference, where he also promoted the family's new business venture, World Liberty Financial, a cryptocurrency platform. I mean, it's only natural, of course, that somebody with a new cryptocurrency, although it wasn't clear to me that it was a cryptocurrency platform. I thought that's what Bakkt was, but the World Liberty Financial was floating a particular token, a coin that could be traded on a cryptocurrency platform. Do I have that wrong? Is the Times right here? But it makes some sense. If you've got an entry in the crypto world, you'll be at this crypto conference, even though you have to be able to fly yourself halfway across the world to do it. And it's all sort of self-selecting in that respect. His comments to attendees signaled that the Trump family is more willing to publicly announce when the president-elect's governing role will steer into his personal investments, and that it is not as concerned as it was in his first administration about avoiding potential conflicts or the appearance of them. F them, as a matter of fact, this time around. Other featured speakers at the event included Steve Witkoff, a real estate executive and golfing buddy of the president-elect, whom Mr. Trump has now named his new Middle East envoy. So he's hanging out in the Middle East already. Mr. Witkoff has already started to work on trying to negotiate a new peace deal in the region, but he is also simultaneously promoting World Liberty Financial, which the Witkoff and Trump families helped create this year. At the conference, Eric Trump and Mr. Witkoff both met privately with Justin Sun. We've heard about him the other day from Judd Legum. He's a cryptocurrency executive targeted by the SEC on fraud charges, who has invested in World Liberty Financial. Also at the conference was Paul Manafort. Oh, Paul Manafort. He's the kind of guy who, if we can just get our sound effects together. Paul Manafort. You may know him as Mr. Trump's 2016 campaign chairman, whom Mr. Trump pardoned before he left office in 2021, clearing a conviction on bank fraud charges, if that's relevant in any way. Mr. Manafort also worked briefly with the Trump campaign this year to help plan the Republican convention. There's a lot of exciting times ahead, Mr. Manafort said in his speech on Tuesday. For those of you who are celebrating the $100,000 Bitcoin, you're going to be celebrating much higher very soon. Okay, well, bad syntax, but we get your point. All right. In his keynote speech, Eric Trump explained that his family had come to embrace cryptocurrency, in part because many major financial institutions and other corporations stopped doing business with the family in the aftermath of the January 6, 2021 assault on the U.S. Capitol, which is astonishing all by itself. But yeah, I mean, yes, they turned around and decided to do so anyway. But I mean, I'm just sort of visualizing it as the equivalent of economic sanctions against them. It's not formal. They're informal. Going back to our first discussed article today. But yeah, there were restrictions nonetheless. And although they were eventually reversed for various political reasons, imagine this is essentially like saying, like a Russian oligarch saying, although I've been sanctioned by market or capital markets around the world such that I can't really participate in the oligarch's favorite game, capitalism, I have a way around that. Unregulated cryptocurrency. Terrific. So he's already plotting his way around the law and any sanctions that might still somehow be enforced against him even during his presidency. Cryptocurrency, Eric explained, is a way to slam the door back in the face of J.P. Morgan Chase, who I'm sure they love to hate, but would gladly take all the money from as long as they line up. Also, and other major banks, of course, and financial institutions that distance themselves from Mr. Trump into family business. I'm also thinking of the moments when individual banks decided to stop doing business with the Trump family companies because they were either unreliable, didn't repay their debt, were constantly suing them, or were defrauding them in some way and defaulting on their loans and generally being a bad business risk. And they decided to stop doing business with them. And by the way, where did they turn then? Before there was cryptocurrency. This is really interesting, right? Well, now cryptocurrency offers a way around these informal sanctions. And so what happens? We love and will align ourselves totally with the cryptocurrency crowd. Now, before there was cryptocurrency, but they had also lost access to most American banks as a source of capital for their various schemes. In this case, one of the least nefarious of their schemes, the golf courses. What did they do for, what did Eric Trump tell us they did for money? Well, we don't deal with American banks. We mostly get our backing from the Russians. Yes. And then, for some strange reason, they became the most pro-Russian presidential administration in American history. And now that will be paralleled by becoming the most pro-crypto administration in American history. And I guess at the very least you can say, well, cryptocurrency by itself is not definitionally overlapping in 100% with Russia. But there's a lot of overlap with Russia, of course, and for the same reasons that there was interest in both Russia and cryptocurrency for the Trump family. They're just basically they're scratching out the word Russia and inserting the word cryptocurrency there instead. But it's the same play, exactly, which is why they were able to execute it. It didn't require any more thinking. It just required grabbing the money from a different source. And I guess if you're going to speak to the press about it, remembering to say crypto instead of Russia. Okay. The attacks on, where were we here? Cryptocurrency is a way to slam the door back on J.P. Morgan and other major financial institutions that distance themselves from Trump. The attacks on the family, the attacks on our company, the nastiness of the system, the hell that they put us through, the hell of being multi-billionaires. Eric Trump said, recalling the periods when his father was first in the White House and after January 6th, which led many companies dropping the Trump organization as a client. Had it not been for those attacks, I don't think my eyes would have been as open to the crypto industry. Yes, it was miserable being a multi-billionaire, wasn't it? Tough times. Off the main stage of this event, a feeding frenzy was underway as crypto investors tried to gain access to people in Mr. Trump's orbit. By the way, that was a bit of clever cover from Eric. I don't know whether he designed the play or not, but the idea that, well, the reason we became interested in crypto. How did you get so interested in crypto? Well, the answer is our Russian oligarchs increasingly wanted to pay us in crypto and move money in crypto rather than getting us the dollars that we were used to using. But we had to, then we figured out how can we convert some of that into dollars. And B, instead of simply saying that's the way that we want to take our bribes, and crypto is really built in some ways for committing crimes with the money and leaving it less traceable. Although how electronic money is non-traceable, I really have no idea. Maybe I just don't understand it well enough. But at any rate, it's just interesting. That became the preferred currency of international crime. Now, saying that would probably get you in trouble, although, it is something Eric Trump is liable to say. But instead, he says, you made me a Nazi. You made me a crypto Nazi by telling me that legitimate banks that actually just want to make money and deal with people under the predictability of the rule of law, because that's the best way to make money and access capital markets, which we discussed earlier. We can't do business with those guys anymore because they don't like us, because we're unpredictable and we lose them money. So I don't know. They're not giving us money anymore, but crypto people will. That is a decent excuse. I mean, just the same way that it was a decent excuse at the time, before everybody knew what it meant to be taking all your money from Russia, to say, yeah, we're still building golf courses even though banks won't lend us any money. We're taking it from Russia instead. And, that turned out to be stupid because everybody later found out how bad Russia was. And as we learn how dumb and bad cryptocurrency is, I imagine the statement will be just as negative in the long run. But for now, I guess everybody still has a positive outlook on cryptocurrency, despite the reality of meme coins up to and including Hawktua coin, which is just about the biggest scam, I think, in the industry to date. But I have something in pocket that suggests there might be an even dumber one. Anyway, back to the narrative. Off the main stage of this event, a feeding frenzy was underway as crypto investors tried to gain access to the people in Mr. Trump's orbit. That's how it goes when there's a Trump around. In the sprawling convention center, and there's by the way, I'm scrolling, there's like a million pictures, a very picture-rich piece, and it really does lend some extra atmospherics to just how frenzied and gross and grubby this gathering of multi-billionaires actually was. In the sprawling convention center, conference attendees, some of whom paid as much as $10,000 for, quote, whale passes, they actually probably called them that, granting them special access to the speakers, posed with cardboard cutouts of Mr. Trump and Elon Musk, the world's richest man. Mr. Trump has tapped Mr. Musk to helm a new initiative on government efficiency, and that's really cleaning the thing up, isn't it? More normalization. DEI for wingnuts, by the way, normalization. Many of the speakers were people who have faced, you'll never believe it, legal problems in the United States, including the chief executive of Kraken, a company that has been sued by the SEC. Who else was there and speaking? Changpeng Zhao, the founder of Binance, who recently completed a federal prison sentence for money laundering violations. I can't believe how many crypto kingpins are caught up in the legal system. It's almost as if the whole cryptocurrency idea had been designed as a way to evade the law so that you could do some illegal things without anybody finding out about it. And then the people who found out about it turned out to be the Department of Justice, and they became that much more determined to catch you. What if that went away? Yes, and that was the point of inviting Eric Trump to the conference, of course. In front of a packed room, Mr. Zhao, who again just got out of prison, credited Mr. Trump for recognizing that, quote, crypto is a superior technology for money. He added, for the people who are in doubt, now Mr. Trump probably fixed most of the doubt. Lawrence M. Noble, who served for over a decade as general counsel at the Federal Election Commission, said he could think of few precedents in American history to compare to this moment. This is taking it to a different level, Mr. Noble, who now teaches law at American University, said. Well, he teaches at American University Law School. Whether what he's teaching is law, you're going to have to wait to find out. This is a direct conflict of interest. We have not seen anything like this before. We have moved so far away from the ethical norms of past presidents where they divested themselves of financial interests, right? He's probably teaching what we would call the history of law at this point. Whether any of his students will have any basis for dealing with the precedents that will prevail throughout most of their careers as lawyers is an open question. He's teaching the way it used to be. But what else can you teach, you know? President-elect Trump was initially a crypto skeptic. He called Bitcoin a scam and said it was designed to undermine the U.S. dollar. It's one of the few things he was briefly right about. But he started to embrace crypto on the campaign trail this year as the industry spent more than $130 million backing congressional candidates. And then, of course, eventually him as well. It's a scam. It's designed to undermine the U.S. dollar, but I started to embrace it when people started to give some of it to me. Now I love it. In September, Mr. Trump and his son started World Liberty Financial, a platform for investors to borrow and lend using cryptocurrencies. They unveiled a new digital currency called WLFI that was available for purchase. Okay, so it's both a platform and a coin. WLFI is the token. WLF is the so-called platform. But considering that the platform is one where investors borrow and lend using cryptocurrencies, it is an unregulated bank. No wonder. The business got off to a rocky start. Not that anybody cares. It aimed to sell $300 million worth of the WLFI tokens, which would have translated to a major windfall for the Trump family. After about 2 weeks, anytime Trump is associated with 2 weeks, you got to laugh. It had only managed to sell $2.7 million, according to securities filings. Going for 300, sold 2.7, but it was only 2 weeks. Then World Liberty Financial, or as we like to say, World Liberty Financial, got a boost in the form of a $30 million token purchase by Mr. Sun. Remember Justin's son? We were just talking about him a moment ago. And of course, it was Judd Legum who told us about the massive bribe that he prepared for Donald Trump through World Liberty Financial. Mr. Sun has legal problems in the United States. The SEC sued him and his company, Tron, last year, accusing them of manipulating the digital currency market, which he has denied. His investment in World Liberty could ultimately result in a payment as large as $22.5 million to Mr. Trump's family under a compensation agreement that entitles a Trump business entity to 75% of token revenue. Why in the world would anybody agree to a deal giving this family 75% of the revenue from the sale of this new instrument? Reasons. Okay. Mr. Sun attended the event in Abu Dhabi, flanked by bodyguards, lest Luigi Mangione show up, I guess. He declined requests for an interview. Eric Trump's speech was the keynote event at the conference, and it was live streamed on YouTube. But conference attendees with a whale pass got access to a networking lounge where Mr. Trump, Mr. Witkoff, and Mr. Manafort gave smaller presentations that were closed to the media. While in the Middle East, Eric Trump is also scheduled to travel to Saudi Arabia, you know it, to announce the start of a new real estate deal there with a branch of Saudi-backed investment company Dar Al Arkan. This, too, is another sign of a more relaxed approach during this new administration to business ethics, as new international deals were postponed during the first term, even though they really weren't. Ravi Singh, a crypto enthusiast who attended the conference, said he had flown from Miami to Abu Dhabi to see Eric Trump speak. He bought a whale pass, I guess. Oh, well, he might have just gone to see the big speech. The president-elect and his allies have, quote, become the new heroes, Mr. Singh said. These guys are the new champions. Eric Trump, in his remarks, compared the deplatforming of the family business by some banks after the January 6th attack to aggressive regulatory actions by the Biden administration, which has filed a series of lawsuits and criminal cases against crypto industry executives, including several who were present in the convention center. So it's a little bit just like when we sacked the capital of the United States of America. Isn't that a little bit like you getting in trouble for failing to report something on an SEC form? I'm not sure. But I saw them come after you. I saw them strip your bank accounts. I saw them cancel you like crazy, which is why you're here on a $10,000 whale pass in Abu Dhabi. You were just devastated afterwards. Well, he made clear that that era is over. Mr. Trump said his nominee to lead the SEC will be securities lawyer Paul Atkins. I think they already said this, who served on the advisory board of a crypto trade group. Eric Trump on Tuesday called Mr. Atkins, quote, an unbelievable ally to this incredible industry. Last week, Mr. Trump named the venture investor David Sachs, another crypto enthusiast, to be the White House AI and crypto czar. I'm not sure what they have to do with one another, but both, I understand, use computers. So, there you go. This is an exciting time, said Mr. Singh, the crypto fan who had traveled from Florida. Everyone here in this room is 300% richer. You saw them strip the bank accounts. You saw them cancel them like crazy. That is some way to come through with a stripped bank account and being canceled, isn't it? Golly. Well, how interesting. We're in for a wild ride. So I've been holding on to this story that illustrates, I guess, some of the less reliable aspects of the cryptocurrency world that I thought I might share with you. And Friday is a good day to do it, and following up these stories might be a good time to do it. This is a piece from Wired magazine. Joel Khalili is the author of this piece. A kid made $50,000 dumping crypto he'd created. Then came the backlash. So it's really more kind of about the backlash than anything else, I guess. But really, it also helps illustrate just how weird crypto has become of late. I don't know that this is necessarily applicable to Bitcoin, but this is really a piece about scamming in the crypto world. And it's not entirely clear to outsiders, though maybe it's clearer to people who really have a better knowledge of what's going on, that hopefully, I guess, although again, if we're leaving this in the hands of people like the Trumps and Cynthia Loomis and others, are we getting ourselves into a situation where they're like, oh yeah, we should absolutely make the United States Treasury sell off gold and buy 1 million Bitcoins as part of the value underwriting the U.S. dollar and our economy and the Federal Reserve System, et cetera, et cetera. Is Bitcoin, yes or no, subject to this kind of manipulation? Maybe not, mostly because of the amount of value it holds and how widely it's traded. But if the same kind of thing underlies the rest of the crypto market, okay, I'll get right to it. Shall we tell you what went on? On the evening of November 19th, art advisor Adam Biesk, I don't know, Biesk, we'll say Biesk maybe. Adam Biesk was finishing work at his California home when he overheard a conversation between his wife and son, who had just come downstairs. The son, a kid in his early teens, was saying he had made a ton of money on cryptocurrency that he himself had created. Kind of Kind of interesting, right? Initially, Bisk ignored it. He knew that his son played around with crypto, but to have turned a small fortune before bedtime was too far-fetched. We didn't really believe it, said Bisk, but when the phone started to ring off the hook and his wife was flooded with angry messages on Instagram, Bisk realized that his son was telling the truth, if not quite the full story. Earlier that evening, at 7:48 p.m. Pacific time, Bisk's son had released into the wild 1 billion units of a new crypto coin, which he named Gen Z Quant. Simultaneously, he spent about $350 to purchase 51 million tokens, about 5% of the total supply, for himself. Then, he started to live stream himself on pump.fun, the website that he had used to launch the coin. And I mean, you really are kind of wandering into dangerous territory. Like, where should I go for my investment advice? Pump.fun. What do you think is happening on pump.fun? Even if it's not fun, there's pumping going on. And what comes after the pumping? Usually the dumping. Anyway, as people tuned in to see what he was doing, they started to buy into Gen Z Quant, and that's really your own fault, people, leading the price to pitch sharply upwards. By 7:56 p.m., what time is that? 7:48 to 7:56. A whirlwind 8 minutes later, Bisk's son's tokens were worth almost $30,000, and he cashed out. No way! He says the word, but holy F, he said, flipping 2 middle fingers to the webcam with tongue sticking out of his mouth. Holy F, thanks for the 20 bandos. After he dumped the tokens, the price of the coin plummeted. So large was his single trade. To the normie ear, all this might sound impossible, but in the realm of meme coins, a type of cryptocurrency with no purpose or utility beyond financial speculation, it's relatively routine. Although many people lose money, a few have been known to make a lot, and fast. Like Hawktua coin, which we heard about just the other day. In this case, Bisk's son had seemingly performed what is known as a soft rug pull, whereby somebody creates a new crypto token, promotes it online, then sells off their entire holdings, either swiftly or over time, sinking its price. These maneuvers occupy something of a legal gray area, lawyers say, but are roundly condemned in the crypto sphere as ethically dubious, at the least. And so I had thought about that. I had seen the term rug pull before, and it made some sense. Pull the rug out from under everybody else. Why is this a soft rug pull? And what's a hard rug pull if that is something that exists? It's implied to exist. Well, yes, it does exist, and they'll get to it a little bit later in the article. And you'll see there's a very significant difference. But after dumping Gen Z Quant, Bisk's son did the same thing with 2 more coins. One called I'm Sorry. That's amazing. And another called My Dog Lucy, bringing his takings for the evening to more than $50,000. Well, the backlash was swift and ferocious. A torrent of abuse began to pour onto the chat logs at pump.fun from traders who felt they'd been swindled. You little effing scammer, wrote one commenter. Soon, the names and pictures of Bisk, his son, and other family members were circulating on X. They had been doxxed. Our phone started blowing up. Just phone call after phone call, said Bisk. It was a very frightening situation. Now, get this. Ready? They're so smart. As part of their revenge campaign, crypto traders continued to buy into Gen Z Quant, driving the coin's price far higher than the level at which Bisk's son had cashed out. So this is the way they get back at you. Aha! We'll show you. We'll drive the value of this valueless thing higher and say, if you had held on, you would have made even more money, but you didn't. And you're a sucker. But there's a kid with $50,000 in his bank account. He doesn't care. Anyway, at its peak around 3 a.m. Pacific time the following morning, the coin had a theoretical total value of $72 million. Kid made it up in his bedroom, after doing his homework. The tokens the teenager had initially held were worth now more than $3 million. Even now, the trading frenzy has died down. They continue to be valued at twice the amount he received. In the end, a lot of people made money on his coin. But for us, caught in the middle, there was a lot of emotion, says Biesk. The online backlash became so frighteningly scary that the realization that he had made money was a kind of tempered down, without down, let's say, with the fact that people became angry and started bullying. Oh boy. Biesk concedes to a limited understanding of crypto, but he sees little distinction between what his son did and, say, playing the stock market or winning at a casino. Yeah, though under California law, someone must be at least 18 years old to gamble or invest in stocks. The unregulated meme coin market, which is the way you guys wanted it, right? Which has been compared to a casino in risk profile, had given Biesk's teenage son early access to a similar arena in which some must lose for others to profit. The way I understand it is he made money and he cashed out, which to me seems like that's what anybody would have done, says Biesk. You get people who are cheering at the craps table or angry at the craps table. Not a bad point, really. Although I don't know if I love the idea of, sure, everybody's going to cash out. That's exactly what you do all the time. Meme coins have been around since 2013 when Dogecoin was released. Interestingly enough, in the following years, a few developers tried to replicate the success of Dogecoin, making play of popular internet memes or tapping into the zeitgeist in some other way in a bid to encourage people to invest. But the cost and complexity of development generally limited the number of meme coins that came to market. That equation was flipped in January with the launch of Pump.Fun, which lets people release new meme coins instantly at no cost. That sounds like a genius idea, except for the danger. The idea, I'll say, interestingly enough, was to give people a safer way to trade meme coins. How so? Well, this is interesting. To me, this seems like, no, that's a higher risk way of trading meme coins. You're going to get taken every afternoon. But why was it supposed to be safer? Well, it was supposed to be safer because it would standardize the underlying code for launching these meme coins, which would prevent developers from building in malicious mechanisms to steal funds in what is known as that hard rug pull. Buying into meme coins was a very unsafe thing to do. It was, and it still is, but it was for a different reason. Programmers could create systems that would obfuscate what you're buying into and basically behave as malicious actors. Everything was designed to suck money out of people, which I don't see as being particularly different from this, but at least this is, well, if you're dumb enough to trade on fake coins and you get taken, that's your business. But at least you were aware of what you were buying and actually got it, versus having a black box tell you got it when maybe you didn't. The harder rug pull, I see what they mean. Well, everything, as they say, was designed to suck money out of people. One of the three anonymous co-founders of Pump.Fun, who goes by Sapijiju, I hope is something like the pronunciation here, this person told Wired earlier in the year, the idea with Pump was to build something where everyone was on the same playing field. And since Pump.Fun launched, millions of unique meme coins have entered the market through the platform. By some metrics, Pump.Fun is the fastest growing crypto application ever. So I guess it's, serious and worthwhile in that respect. It's the fastest growing crypto application ever. Something's happening here. Taking in more than $250 million in revenue as a 1% cut of trades on the platform in less than a year in operation. However, Pump.Fun has found it impossible to insulate users from soft rug pulls. Though the platform gives users access to information to help assess risk, like the proportion of a coin belonging to the largest few holders. Soft rug pulls are difficult to prevent by technical means, claims Sapijuju. People say there's a bunch of different stuff you can do to block soft rug pulls, maybe a sell tax or lock up the people who create the coin. Truthfully, all of this is very easy to manipulate, he says. Whatever we do to stop people doing this, there's always a way to circumnavigate if you're smart enough. The important thing is creating an interface that is as simple as possible and giving the tools for users to see if a coin is legitimate or not. None of them are, but okay. The overwhelming majority, it says, of new crypto tokens entering the market are scams of one form or another, designed expressly to squeeze money from buyers, not to hold a sustained value in the long term, according to crypto security company Blockade. In the period since meme coin launchpads like Pump.Fun began to gain traction, the volume of soft rug pulls, that's what happened with Haktua coin, has increased in lockstep, says Ido Ben Natan, Blockade founder. I generally agree that it is kind of impossible to prevent holistically. It's a game of cat and mouse, says Ben Natan. It's definitely impossible to cover 100% of these things, but it definitely is possible to detect repeat offenders looking at metadata and different kinds of patterns. Now, meme coin trading has been popularized. There can be no putting the genie back in the bottle, says Ben Natan. But traders are perhaps uniquely vulnerable at present, he says, in a period when many are newly infatuated with meme coins, yet before the fledgling platforms have figured out the best way to protect them. The space is immature, says Ben Natan. Whether it is legal to perform a rug pull is also something of a gray area. It depends on both jurisdiction and whether explicit promises are made to prospective investors, experts say. The absence of bespoke crypto regulations in countries like the US, meanwhile, inadvertently, maybe, creates cloud cover for the acts that are perhaps not overtly illegal. These actions exploit the gaps in existing regulatory frameworks, where unethical behavior, like developers hyping a project and later abandoning it, might not explicitly violate laws if no fraudulent misrepresentation, contractual breach, or other violations occur, says Ronghui Gu, co-founder of crypto security firm Certic and associate professor of computer science at Columbia University. The Gen Z Quant broadcast is no longer available to view in full, but in the clips reviewed by Wired, at no point does Beast's son promise to hold his tokens for any specific period. Neither do the Pump.Fun terms of use require people to refrain from selling tokens they create. Sapi Juju, the Pump.Fun co-founder, declined to comment on the Gen Z Quant incident. They say that Pump.Fun will, quote, will be introducing age restrictions in the future, but declined to elaborate. But even then, under the laws of numerous U.S. states, among them California, the developer likely still owes heightened legal duties to the investors, so may be liable for breaching obligations that result in loss of value, says Jeffrey Berg, partner at law firm Berg, Plummer & Johnson. The developer is in a position of trust and must place the interests of the investors over his own. To clarify whether these legal duties apply to people who release meme coins through websites like Pump.Fun, who buy into their coins like everyone else, albeit at the moment of launch and therefore at a discount and in a potentially market swinging quantities, new laws may be required. In June of 2026, a new regime will take effect in California where Beast's family lives, requiring residents to obtain a license to take part in digital financial asset business activity, including exchanging, transferring, storing, or administering certain crypto assets. President-elect Donald Trump has also promised new crypto regulations. Isn't that something? But for now, there are no crypto-specific laws in place. We are in a legal vacuum where there are no clear laws, says Andrew Gordon, partner at law firm Gordon Law. Once we know what is in bounds, we will also know what is out of bounds. This will hopefully create a climate where rug pulls don't happen, or when they do, they are seen as a criminal violation. On November 19th, as the evening wore on, angry messages continued to tumble in, says Biesk. Though some celebrated his son's antics, calling for him to return and create another coin, others were threatening or aggressive. "Your son stole my effing money," wrote one person over Instagram. Biesk and his wife were still trying to understand quite how their son was able to make so much money so fast. "I was trying to get an understanding of exactly how this meme crypto trading works," says Biesk. Some meme coin traders, sensing there could be money in riffing off the turn of events, created new coins on pump.fun inspired by Biesk and his wife. Quant Dad and Quant's mom both are now practically worthless. Equally disturbed and bewildered, Biesk and his wife formed a provisional plan to make all public social media accounts private, stop answering the phone, and generally hunker down until things blew over. Biesk's account is still active at the time of writing. Biesk declined to comment on whether the family made contact with law enforcement or what would happen to the funds, saying only that his son would, quote, put the money away. That's called keep it. A few hours later, an X account under the name of Biesk's son posted on X pleading for people to stop contacting his parents. "I'm sorry about Quant. I didn't realize I get so much money. Please don't write to my parents. I will pay you back." With some spelling errors along the way. Read the post. Biesk claims the account is not operated by his son. Though alarmed by the backlash, Biesk is impressed by the entrepreneurial spirit and technical capability his son displayed. Entrepreneurial spirit. Okay, it's actually sort of a sophisticated trading platform, he says. He obviously learned it on his own. That his teenager was capable of making $50,000 in an evening, Biesk theorizes, speaks to the fundamentally different relationship kids of that age have with money and investing, characterized by an urgency and hyperactivity that rubs up against traditional wisdom. You think? To me, crypto can be hard to grasp because there is nothing behind it, and it's not anything tangible. But I think kids relate to this intangible digital world more than adults do, says Biesk. This has an immediacy to him. It's almost like he understands this better. On December 1st, after a 2-week hiatus, Biesk's son returned to pump.fun to launch 5 new meme coins, apparently undeterred by the abuse, which he didn't really have to endure. Disregarding the warnings built into the very names of some of the new coins, one was named Test and another Don't Buy. People bought in. Biesk's son made another $5,000. I can't even tell you what to do about this. But he named it Don't Buy, Your Honor. There's really nothing we can do for these people. They're on their own. Sophisticated investors. Something I learned about in my securities law class. That, they apparently don't need protections from this sort of thing because of how sophisticated they are. Get off our case and stop regulating us. Man, why do I even wake up in the mornings? All right, I need to switch gears and deliver on something I've been promising to do for a while, and I thought Friday might be a good day to do it. Rosalind McGregor sent me something. This is not Rosalind's interpretation of a story, but rather this is her capture of the video of a Zoom call or something quite like it, a conference call for the cause that she has been working on for some time, the last-ditch effort to get President Biden, before leaving office, to cause the publication of what would be the 28th Amendment, the Equal Rights Amendment, in order to at least establish the initial legal claim that it belongs as part of the Constitution going forward, it having been ratified by the requisite number of states. Of course, you may remember Rosalind's explanation of the legal grayness, I guess, of the situation, presenting the stories both pro and con there. But the American Bar Association, which kind of knows something about this stuff, has basically come to the conclusion as a formal decision of the body that all of the real legal prerequisites have been met. The 28th Amendment is ratified. The only thing standing in the way is publication by the archivist. And this is something that the president, currently Joe Biden, can give the go-ahead to do. One of, 50,000 things that people insist he do before leaving office. But this is a big one. This, though, is the audio for you. There's video, too, of Kirsten Gillibrand, Senator Gillibrand, on this ERA call, basically laying out the ask of President Biden. And I want to get that in there before the weekend so that you, too, can add your voice to the campaign in support of adding the ERA to the Constitution.
I'm delighted to be joining this call. Thank you to the previous speaker for the personal testimony. It really makes a difference. I want to thank Shattering Glass and Free Speech for People for bringing us together tonight. I also want to acknowledge former Nevada State Senator Pat Spearman, Dr. Cheryl Hamlin as well for emceeing. I also want to thank you for your commitment to the rights of women everywhere. Thank you for standing up for all the unfinished business we have to do in making sure we have an equal rights amendment to our U.S. Constitution. I think everyone on this call knows the history, but suffragists like Alice Paul and New York City's Crystal Eastman drafted this constitutional amendment over 100 years ago. It passed by 2/3 in the House and Senate in the 1970s and then was sent to the states. Like all constitutional amendments, the ERA requires 3/4 of those states to ratify it. It took a while, but in 2020, Virginia became the final the 38th state, the 3/4 of states that was necessary to ratify the amendment. So by law, the ERA should have been signed and published by the archivist in 2020 and become the 28th Amendment. Well, why didn't that happen? Obviously, the president at the time was Donald Trump, and he directed his lawyers to make sure the ERA was not published. His lawyers used flawed reasoning in an Office of Legal Counsel opinion, saying that it took too long and it couldn't be published. Now, with Trump becoming president again, and with Republicans set to control the House, Senate, and the Supreme Court, we continue to face an unbelievable threat to women's reproductive freedom. But they're not in full control yet, which is why we're having this call. And if there's one thing that we can do and should do before January 20th, it is to call on the archivist to sign and publish the Equal Rights Amendment. We need to make discrimination on the basis of sex, like all restrictions on reproductive health care that single out gender, unconstitutional once and for all. Why? Because it's our best chance to have protections for reproductive freedom. It's the only way to enshrine equality for all America's women and girls into the U.S. Constitution. It could be used to enhance protections against pay discrimination, gender-based violence, sex discrimination in federally funded education programs or activities. It could help curb discrimination against pregnant people in the workplace, as well as guarantee our reproductive freedom. Too many lives have been already lost because the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. But this is our secret weapon, and it is high time to use it. How do we make this happen? Well, I am pushing on President Biden and the Biden administration to direct the archivist right now to sign and publish the ERA. I also spoke to my Senate colleagues. We wrote a letter and we got 46 signatures on that letter, requesting the administration to take a look at this and to direct the archivist to sign and publish it. But I think tonight is about garnering and building a show of support from the American people. We already have the lawyers behind us. The ABA wrote a decision saying that our legal arguments that the 7-year deadline in the preamble is not constitutionally operative. It's not operative for two reasons. One, Article 5 does not give Congress the ability to set deadlines. And in the alternative, if you believe Congress can set a deadline, then setting one in a preamble is not constitutionally operative. You would have had to put it in the actual amendment itself, which is what the states actually ratify. So we believe these arguments are the strongest arguments. Pretty much every blue or purple state attorney general has also signed on to a brief arguing these points. So we believe we have the weight of the law on our side. Donald Trump's Office of Legal Counsel memo misstated the law. They said all constitutional amendments have to be done in a timely way from the time they're proposed. That's definitely not true. They cited a 1921 case, but little did they acknowledge the 27th Amendment took 203 years to ratify. So there's no timeliness requirement. So we believe this is the strongest legal argument. I have pitched this directly to President Biden last time I saw him in New York City. He loved the idea. So now it's about creating momentum for his team to get behind him and the rest of us to want to call on the archivist to sign and publish. I believe the archivist, once she hears this from the president, I think she'll have the courage to do so. So I'm optimistic that our advocacy can make a difference. Americans may have elected Donald Trump to be the next president of the United States, but a majority still support the right to reproductive freedom. We need to show President Biden that this is something the American people support before it's too late. So I urge you to go to shatteringglass.org/take action and make your voice heard. The ERA is literally the only constitutional amendment that's ever been proposed that met all the requirements, that got the 2/3 of the House and Senate, as we did in the 70s, and got 3/4 of the states to ratify, like we finished in 2020, and is still being denied certification. So I believe it is absolutely the right time for President Biden to hear from the American people about why this is so important to ensure and enshrine equality for all in our U.S. Constitution.
All right. Thanks to Rosalind McGregor for sending us that clip. I know that I've mentioned to you before, and Rosalind has reported before on this subject. Just a good clarification from the senator and a good reminder that this is yet one more job to add to the mounting stack of last-minute tasks we hope will capture Joe Biden's attention and that he can set right before handing over the keys, unfortunately, one more time to Donald Trump. Okay, so we have just about run out of time here. Time for us to duck out for the weekend, it being Friday. Just want to throw in, I guess, one more thing that I happened to see. Late breaking news. I guess Trump got what must have been a dream come true day for him. A chance to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange. And also the announcement that he was, I guess, at long last going to be the Time Magazine Person of the Year, which must have pissed him off at some level because why doesn't it say Man of the Year? I wanted to be Time Man of the Year. Now they got to say PC Person. What am I, transgender? Oh, God. So this probably bothered him to no extent. But he's made it. I mean, it's hard to be elected president twice and not be Man of the Year at some point. But at any rate, so this picture of him at the New York Stock Exchange ringing the bell. I do wonder, I'm a little, do you think Trump is at all suspicious that he's living on like a Truman Show set? Did I lose the election and all these people around me are trying to pretend that I won so I won't get angry? Now I'm going to get angry because I don't really know whether I won the election. I just sort of, I don't know. I mean, I think he'd kind of enjoy all the adulation one way or the other. Just wondering. And as it turns out, by the way, from the looks of the photograph and the video that I see, everyone at the New York Stock Exchange is 6'3" and above. It's a whole basketball team full of stockbrokers. Really kind of amazing. I'll show you the picture and video. And boy, you should listen to the story he tells in this video.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
It says here, there's a transcript of the video. Trump says, I tell the story of a woman who went to the grocery store, had 3 apples, and she put them down on the counter, and she looked, and she saw the price, and she said, excuse me, and she put one of the apples back in the refrigerator. The refrigerator? I'm surprised he didn't say an apple. Well, how much could it cost? $10? Hey, we'll see you next week.